Let's talk about what's happening with Melania Trump right now, because this is honestly remarkable. She is doing everything in her power to avoid being served legal papers. We're talking about dodging process servers constantly, moving around, doing absolutely everything she can to avoid getting those documents into her hands. And why is she doing this? It's all connected to Michael Wolff, the journalist, and a lawsuit brewing in New York that she desperately wants to stop. Her primary argument, the thing she keeps coming back to again and again, is this: the doorman got served, but she didn't get served personally. That's what she's saying. The doorman at Trump Tower received the papers, but she herself didn't have them placed directly into her hands. So therefore, in her mind, service hasn't been properly completed. But here's the thing. Maybe the reason she didn't get served personally is because she's been actively dodging service. She's moving around constantly, bouncing between Mar-a-Lago down in Florida, then up to Trump Tower in New York, then over to Bedminster in New Jersey, and occasionally, when it suits her, she's at the White House. It's basically a game of catch me if you can. But here's what Melania and her legal team apparently don't understand. This strategy of constantly moving around and avoiding service doesn't actually work in federal practice. It's not a legitimate legal strategy. You can't just dodge process servers indefinitely and claim that because you successfully avoided them, the case can't proceed. That's a losing argument. What she's really trying to do, as a fallback position, as a backup plan if her primary arguments don't work, is to get this case transferred from New York all the way down to the Southern District of Florida. And why would she want that? Because if the case gets transferred down to Florida, there's a very real possibility it could end up in front of Judge Aileen Cannon, the judge who has been extremely favorable to Donald Trump in the past, the one who dismissed his classified documents case. So you have to ask yourself, is this entire elaborate dance, this whole routine about not being properly served, all just an attempt to eventually get this case in front of Donald Trump's favorite judge? Let me give you the background on all of this. Michael Wolff is a journalist, and he's been doing his job, which is investigating and reporting on public figures. Back in October, he received a demand letter sent on official letterhead from Donald Trump's lawyer, who also happens to be representing Melania. The lawyer's name is Alejandro Brito, and in this demand letter, he was demanding $1 billion from journalist Michael Wolff. $1 billion. Why was he demanding this astronomical sum? It stems from reports that appeared in the Daily Beast and various other publications. Wolff had been making comments, primarily repeating things that Jeffrey Epstein had told him about Melania, connecting the dots between Epstein and Melania, between Trump and Epstein, between Melania and the modeling world. So he gets this demand letter as a journalist, demanding $1 billion unless he retracts his statements and apologizes for what they're calling defamatory statements. But here's where Michael Wolff did something really smart. Instead of backing down, instead of being intimidated by this massive billion-dollar threat, he beat Melania to the punch. In October, he filed his own lawsuit in New York State Supreme Court. He asked the judge for a declaration that every single one of those statements that Melania's team is complaining about is either true or, alternatively, cannot be the subject of a defamation case in the first place. He also asked the judge to declare that the billion-dollar threat being made against him is an unconstitutional attempt to chill his First Amendment rights as a journalist. Now, in order to get a lawsuit properly commenced, you have to serve it on the other side. Just filing papers with the court isn't enough. You have to physically get those documents into the hands of the defendant through a process server. Well, Melania has spent most of October, all of November, and straight through the holidays dodging service. They try to serve her at one location, she's not there. They try another location, she's already moved. It's a deliberate pattern of evasion. In federal court, this strategy doesn't generally work. There are ways to obtain from the judge what's called approved alternative service. If a person is deliberately trying to avoid being served, you can ultimately serve papers on the Secretary of State of that state and publish notice of the lawsuit in a newspaper, and that can constitute valid service. The judge has discretion here and can come up with methods of service that will be legally sufficient. What did Michael Wolff's team do? They handed the papers to a doorman at Trump Tower. Her name is literally on the building. She lives there at least part of the time. They also sent copies to her lawyer. So clearly Melania and her legal team know about this lawsuit because they're filing papers about it and responding to it. Her second argument is that there's no personal jurisdiction over her in New York. Those of us who are in and around New York know that Melania is here an awful lot, shopping on Fifth Avenue, charity events, and most importantly, keeping an eye on her son Barron, who is going to school here. So to claim that there's no jurisdiction over her in New York is really quite something. The demand letter that was sent by Brito was physically mailed to Michael Wolff in New York, making this billion-dollar demand. The threatening letter was sent to New York. The journalist lives in New York. A lot of his work happens in New York. Melania's team is going to have a hard time convincing a judge that New York doesn't have jurisdiction. And then lastly, they're arguing that even if the judge decides to keep the case in New York, it should be transferred to the Southern District of Florida, down where she supposedly lives near Palm Beach County. There are only 3 judges who handle cases near where she lives in Palm Beach County: Judge Rosenberg, Judge Middlebrooks, and Judge Cannon down in Fort Pierce, Florida. And it's so transparent what they're shooting for. They want Judge Cannon. The same firm representing her, DLA Piper, publicly said in 2020 and 2021 that Donald Trump was unfit for office, but then something changed, because in 2022 and currently, they represent Donald Trump and Truth Social on all of their corporate affairs. The same firm that said he was unfit for office is now one of his main corporate law firms, and now they're representing Melania in this case, doing everything possible to delay, transfer, and ultimately bury a lawsuit that she created for herself the moment she sent that billion-dollar threat to a journalist who refused to back down.